And there's a lot of reporting that the team around Trump has been divided when it comes to the extremely vital question. I don't think there's a more important foreign policy question, certainly right now, and probably we won't have one for the next 4 years, let's hope not, than the possibility that the United States, with Israeli pressure, will go and bomb and attack Iran, and then easily that could escalate because Iran has lots of retaliatory and escalatory options. So there are a lot of people in Trump's world who are saying, this is madness, you have to reach a deal with Iran. And then other people saying, no, this is the opportunity to get Iran finally, to bomb them, even change the regime. And Mike Waltz was clearly in the more hawkish, war-seeking camp. Here from Axios, just as one example, Trump's team's Iran divide, dialogue versus detonation to end the nuclear threat. Quote, President Trump has vowed to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, but inside his national security team, there's a divide over the best way to do it. Officials are divided over which route is more likely to be successful, but they agree that without a deal, there will likely be a war. One camp, unofficially led by Vice President J.D. Vance, believes a diplomatic solution is preferable and possible, and that the U.S. should be ready to make compromises in order to make it happen. Vance is highly involved in the Iran policy discussions, and other U.S. officials said this camp, the one trying to avoid war with Iran, also includes Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who represented the U.S. at the first round of Iran talks on Saturday, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. It also gets outside support from MAGA influencer and Trump whisperer Tucker Carlson, lots of effort to go around the term journalist, and as well Steve Bannon is a fanatical, outspoken opponent of war with Iran. And you had people like Charlie Kirk who have been repeatedly outspoken, Donald Trump Jr. as well. So there's a substantial camp that is insisting that Trump will ruin his presidency, will ruin his legacy if he drags the U.S. into another Middle East war at Israel's urging. This group, the ones trying to avoid a war, is concerned that striking Iran's nuclear facilities would put U.S. soldiers in the region in harm's way when Iran strikes back. The other side, the other camp, includes National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They're highly suspicious of Iran and extremely skeptical of the chances of a deal that significantly rolls back Iran's nuclear program. Senators close to Trump, like Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, and Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas, also hold that view. This camp believes Iran is weaker than ever, and therefore the U.S. should not compromise, but instead insist Tehran fully dismantle its nuclear program, and should either strike Iran directly or support an Israeli strike if they don't. The chances that Iran is going to give up their nuclear program entirely is zero. The chances of that are zero. Iran has long made that clear. That is a non-starter for them. They will not do that under any circumstances. They demand the right to use nuclear energy, to have nuclear reactors. And they've long insisted they're not trying to get a nuclear weapon. They had inspectors all around every one of those facilities and surveillance every day, which they agreed to as part of the Iran deal that President Obama entered into with Iran, along with the Europeans and the Russians, and which Trump insisted was too weak of a deal, and therefore he vowed on the 2016 campaign trail that he would immediately nullify the Iran deal, which the Israelis hated from the day it was signed. And he did that. He nullified the Iran deal. All the inspectors went away, and it made Iran more capable of developing a nuclear weapon because they weren't being watched anymore. And it should be noted that Biden spent 4 years nominally as president, and that administration did not renew the Iran deal with the Iranians. They didn't try and institute a new deal. They were very pro-Israel, that administration. And so now Trump is in the position of either having to get another deal with them that he has to prove is much stronger than the one Obama got, since Trump went around saying forever that that was too weak, that that wasn't sufficient, and actually withdrew from that deal. He has to get a deal that is enough to be able to say that that's much stronger than the one Obama got, but not so strong that the Iranians won't accept it. He has to try and find the sweet spot, which won't be easy. And their first Iran deal was very delicately and laboriously negotiated. And then they're pretty much stuck with the idea of bombing Iran if they can't get an agreement, because Trump has long said we will go to war as a way to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, which will happen if he says there's no deal. So that's the position that they're in, and that's the breakdown of the debate. And there's no question, in my mind, none, that Trump desperately wants a deal with Iran. He does not want to participate in a war, get dragged into an Israeli war. He campaigned on the promise of being the peacemaker, of avoiding wars. This is something he prides himself on, notwithstanding his bad decision to renew the Biden bombing campaign in the Houthis, to renew it and escalate it. I do believe Trump cares about being perceived as the person who stopped wars and not started ones. He was the one who negotiated with the Taliban to withdraw from Afghanistan. He was prevented from doing so. It was Biden who ended up doing so, but that was Trump's initiative, to negotiate with the Taliban to finally be able to pull out of Afghanistan. He clearly wants to end the war with Ukraine and Russia, and I know he wants to avoid a war with Iran. The problem is that he has a lot of people pressuring him to go to war with Iran, leading with the Israelis. Here's the New York Times on April 16th, which was the same day as that Axios article reporting on the internal divisions, where Mike Waltz is specifically. Trump waved off Israeli strike after divisions emerged in his administration. Quote, Israel had planned to strike Iranian nuclear sites as soon as next month, but was waved off by President Trump in recent weeks in favor of negotiating a deal with Tehran to limit its nuclear program, according to administration officials and others briefed on the discussions. Mr. Trump made his decision after months of internal debate over whether to pursue diplomacy or support Israel in seeking to set back Iran's ability to build a bomb at a time when Iran has been weakened militarily and economically. Israeli officials, remember, this is when Netanyahu visited Trump for the second time. He purportedly came to talk about tariffs, but they spent all their time, according to everybody, on whether the U.S. should help Israel bomb Iran, change the regime, take out all the nuclear program. Quote, Israeli officials had recently developed plans to attack Iranian nuclear sites in May. They were prepared to carry them out and at times were optimistic that the U.S. would sign off. The goal of the proposals, according to officials briefed on them, was to set back Tehran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon by a year or more. Almost all of the plans would have required U.S. help, but not just to defend Israel from Iranian retaliation, but also to ensure that an Israeli attack was successful, making the United States a central part of the attack itself. For now, Mr. Trump has chosen diplomacy over military action. Look how often the Israelis want to start wars, but make clear that the United States has to get dragged into those wars, has to protect them, has to help them bomb, has to put our own soldiers in the region, endangering them because Iran can easily strike and has done so before. Small U.S. bases, unprotected. These are not sprawling, highly protected military bases like like we had in the Gulf states or we had in Iraq. These are small bases of 500 or 1,000 troops that are highly vulnerable. And there have been strikes, not by Iran necessarily, but by groups aligned with Iran, strikes on those camps that have killed American soldiers. And it's a tiny fraction of what Iran is capable of doing and would likely do if we bomb them. So here's Israel saying, yeah, put your troops in harm's way, deploy your military to fight our war against Iran, endanger your oil rigs and your military and economic assets and the lives of your citizens to fight this war that we want to fight because it's in our interest to change the regime in Iran, but we want to use you for it. And clearly Trump doesn't want that. And so if you have the person that you're supposed to be relying upon to give you this sage, dependable advice and counsel as your national security advisor, Mike Waltz, and he's clearly pushing you to war when you don't want to go to war, especially for someone like Trump that has to create tensions and resentment. Like, look, this person, if Trump perceives that somebody wants war, remember that those comments he made about Liz Cheney, that the CNN tried to turn into a vow to assassinate her, that she did too, where he was just basically saying, yeah, Liz Cheney loves war because it's never her that has to go fight in them. He said she's a war pig. And let's see if she would change her mind if she's the one who has to face down machine guns and rifles and the like, pointed at her face. So Trump does have this kind of personal aversion to people who too blatantly want war. Again, he's not a pacifist. He's not a anti-war extremist, as his Yemen bombing demonstrates. He bombed heavily in Syria and Iraq in his first term. He withdrew from the Iran deal. But if somebody seems too eager for war, he immediately starts disliking them. We've seen that pattern over and over. He got rid of John Bolton for that. And there's no doubt that Mike Waltz is that person. And guess you can have that person somewhere in your orbit just to hear their voice, but when they're the person right next to the Oval Office who's supposed to be there kind of being the last word, and they're completely on the opposite track as the one you want to go on, that has to contribute to your willingness to get rid of the person. Now, you could say replacing Mike Waltz with Marco Rubio is sort of a wash ideologically or in terms of military strategy. Marco Rubio is also, according to all these reports, in the camp that wants to go to war with Iran, that doesn't believe a deal can be done. But Rubio is much slicker about it, much more cunning, much more sophisticated in how he talks about these things to make it appear like he's aligned with Trump when he really may not be, and Waltz just doesn't have that capability. Speaking of people who don't hide their obsession with having the U.S. perpetually involved in wars for other countries, Senator Tom Cotton said this on X 2 days ago, quote, President Trump said the only solution is Iran completely dismantling its program, or we should do it for them, and he's right. A nuclear Iran is a direct threat not just to our friends in the Middle East, but to every American. And one of the things the Israelis are doing and people like Tom Cotton are doing is they're trying to pretend that they also think that a deal should be done if it can be. But they're setting the terms of the agreement purposely to be impossible, knowing that Iran would never accept it. After Netanyahu left the White House, he went on television in Israel and he said, like, yeah, we would love an agreement. The agreement that we would accept is the Gaddafi deal, named after the now murdered and deposed Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. In the 90s, Gaddafi was told, it was actually right after when the war on terror commenced, when they were invading Iraq, Gaddafi was told by the US and by the West, look, if you don't want to be the next Saddam Hussein, if you don't want us to invade your country and depose you, just basically disarm, give up all your real weapons, let us inspect to make sure you have, and then don't worry, you'll be part of us. We will guarantee your security. You won't suffer the fate of Afghanistan and Iraq where we invade you. And Gaddafi said, okay, I think that's a good deal. I'd rather have my country integrated into the world than isolated from it. So he gave up all his weapons. And then 10 years later, Obama and France and the UK, David Cameron, Nicolas Sarkozy convinced Obama to join that war. They bombed Libya with the intent of regime change, even though they denied it. And Gaddafi ended up forced out of his palace and onto the street where he was anally raped to death by an angry crowd, an angry mob. So the Israelis are telling the Iranians, yeah, you'll be fine, just follow the Gaddafi model. And you think Tehran is looking at what happened to Gaddafi and being like, yeah, we'll take that. We'd like to be the next Gaddafi. That sounds really good. But that's what Netanyahu is doing, pretending for Trump's sake that he too would like an agreement, but setting it up an agreement as the only minimally acceptable agreement that he knows what the Iranians could never and would never accept and would force Trump into the war that they really want. Here's Lindsey Graham in Tel Aviv, a place that he often is, and when he's not there, he's talking about it, meeting it with Netanyahu at one of Israel's main military installations. By the way, Israel has tons of nuclear weapons, so we're not against nuclear weapons proliferating in the Middle East. We just want to make sure Israel is the only one that keeps their military superiority and that Iran can't be on the same level of Israel, so that Iran can't deter Israel from attacking when it wants. We have to make sure Israel can attack whoever it wants, whenever it wants, meaning they're the only ones with nuclear weapons. So here's Lindsey Graham in Tel Aviv, you could say of Tel Aviv, speaking with Netanyahu in February.
The Trump administration is going to have to make a decision here very soon about the Iran nuclear program. There are two paths to take. A military path where we help Israel deliver a decisive blow against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. I prefer that path. The second path...
Do you see what he said? Very, very clear. Sitting with Netanyahu saying, look, one option is to just go to war with Iran, bomb the crap out of their nuclear facilities, do it in partnership with our lovely close friends Israel. And then he's about to say there's a second path which would avoid war, and that's diplomacy. But Lindsey Graham was very clear, especially knowing that the Israelis were listening, saying, the path that I just laid out, the one where we just go to war with Iran, bomb Iran with the Israelis, that's the one I prefer, not this diplomacy crap. And then he went on.
Is to negotiate with Iran to try to get them to abandon their nuclear ambitions. If that path is chosen, it needs to be limited in time. We should put it on the clock. and we should define what success looks like.
So you see these people close to Trump and what they're putting in his ear. And that is very dangerous. I think Trump is resisting them for now, all accounts, not just public accounts, but people I talk to who are close to the administration, all say the same thing unanimously, that Trump is genuinely determined to avoid a war with Iran, but he will go to war with Iran if he can't get a deal that he can boast is much stronger than the one Obama got. And like I said, there are a lot of MAGA voices, important, influential MAGA voices inside the White House and outside, who are being quite vocal and vociferous about their steadfast opposition to war with Iran. One of them is Charlie Kirk, who in early April said this, quote, "It's going unnoticed because so much other news is happening, but the war drums are beating again in D.C. The warmongers worry this is their last chance to get the white whale they've been chasing for 30 years, which is an all-out regime change war against Iran." And Charlie Kirk is 1,000% right. That's the game. The nuclear installations are the pretext. Just like when Obama went to war in Libya, the pretext was, oh, we're going to protect the people of Benghazi. Remember that? We're going to just do a no-fly zone over Benghazi to prevent Gaddafi from massacring the people of Benghazi. But don't worry, it's not regime change. And then very quickly it turned into a regime change operation. Obviously, Iraq was admittedly sold as a regime change operation. But this is what they really want, regime change. That has been what they've been tasting for so long. They want to install the Shah of Iran's utterly fail son and just like restore the glorious Pahlavi monarchy to the Persian state and let him be the puppet to Israel and the US that his father was when we installed him after we overthrew their government. That's the real dream. Kirk went on, quote, "A new Middle East war would be a catastrophic mistake. Our military stockpiles are depleted from the 3 years of backing Ukraine," and you could say Israel as well. "Our effort to reshore manufacturing has only just begun and will take years to bear fruit. War would worsen our already immense deficit and national debt. Iran is larger than Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan combined. A war would not be easy and could easily become a calamity. Thanks to President Trump's restraint during his first term, America has a golden opportunity to pull away from Middle East quagmires for good. We shouldn't throw that away again so that D.C. has-beens can feel tough by sending young Americans to die yet again." Just 100% endorse that. He's continued to say that. Whatever else you think about Charlie Kirk, that is an important voice in trying to bring a stop to a war with Iran. Tucker Carlson is an extremely important voice in that as well. And so is Steve Bannon from the New Arab in mid-April last month, quote, "Arrogant Netanyahu trying to pressure U.S. into Iran attacks," says Steve Bannon. Speaking on his podcast, Steve Bannon said Netanyahu, quote, "forced his way into meetings with Trump in a bid to win backing for a strike on Tehran's nuclear sites." Quote, "Trump insider Steve Bannon has accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of attempting to pressure the White House to approve a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities." Speaking on his podcast on Thursday, Trump's former chief strategist said Netanyahu had forced his way into 2 meetings with the U.S. president and accused him of, quote, "arrogance" in trying to, quote, "force the issue." Netanyahu has been to Washington twice since Trump's inauguration in January in a bid to lobby the White House into supporting Israel's escalation in Gaza and a major military strike on Iran. You see where this pressure is coming from. From Tel Aviv, from Jerusalem, whatever you want to say is the Israeli capital. The world's divided on that. But this is a war for Israel. That's exactly what this would be. And its supporters in the U.S. Here was Tucker Carlson on April 7th. Quote, "Whatever you think of tariffs, it's clear that now is the worst possible time for the United States to participate in a military strike on Iran. We can't afford it. Thousands of Americans would die. We'd lose the war that follows. Nothing would be more destructive to our country. And yet we're closer than ever thanks to unrelenting pressure from neocons. This is suicidal. Anyone advocating for conflict with Iran is not an ally of the United States, but rather an enemy." And then 2 days ago, Charlie Kirk noticed that there's been these smear campaigns in the media against anybody who's in the camp of trying to prevent war with Iran. There's been smear campaigns against Pete Hegseth, a campaign to get fired all of his closest allies, which has been successful. There's obviously been a huge coordinated smear campaign against Tucker Carlson. And there's a massive campaign out to delegitimize Steve Witkoff who deserves credit for having facilitated the peace deal, the ceasefire deal that didn't hold up, but he did facilitate it. It lasted about a month between Israel and Gaza. He's also trying hard to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. And he is vehemently in the camp of trying to avoid war with Iran. And there's been many articles placed trying to attack Steve Witkoff as on the Russian payroll or the Qatari payroll, all the standard smears they make. And one of the groups behind that is called the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which has been around Washington forever. They're a hardcore neocon, pro-Israel, pro-war group. And the article that was planted, I think in the New York Post, about Steve Witkoff included this, quote, "The last time Trump had a chance to meet directly with the Iranian government, Bolton pushed back hard. Mark Dubowitz, head of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy and a highly influential figure during Trump's first term, is hoping that, quote, the new generation of hawks in the administration could try to block a deal internally by framing it as humiliating and embarrassing to Trump personally." So that's their strategy, saying, look, if you actually avoid a war with Iran, it's basically you're going to be humiliated trying to play on Trump's insecurities. Like, you're going to look weak. It then goes on, quote, "Anybody engaging in these kinds of talks with Putin," meaning Witkoff, "would benefit from having experienced Russia hands on his or her team and meeting with them and bringing them along to the Kremlin." John Hardy, director of the Foundation of Defense of Democracy's Russia program, said of Witkoff's move, meaning going to meet Putin and trying to end the war. So there's this massive attack on Witkoff. And about that, Charlie Kirk said just 2 days ago, quote, "The Foundation for the Defense of Democracies is leading the anti-Witkoff operation. They are openly calling for people in the administration to undermine President Trump to stop a deal with Iran. The anti-Witkoff forces are anti-MAGA." And then Donald Trump Jr., a major voice in the Trump administration, retweeted that Charlie Kirk tweet and said, quote, "Deep state neocons are smearing Steve Witkoff because they're trying to undermine my father's foreign policy agenda. The establishment wants forever war." And it's hard to dispute any of that. That's clearly what is happening. You had 3 close allies and friends of Pete Hegseth at the top of the Pentagon, all of whom had this isolationist, anti-interventionist, avoiding war in the Middle East perspective, led by Dan Caldwell, who we talked about last week, all of whom got fired based on fabricated accusations that they were leakers, and they manipulated and cajoled Hegseth to get rid of these people who were trying to stop a war with Iran as well. And then you see all these attacks on Hegseth and Tucker Carlson and Steve Witkoff, J.D. Vance, the people leading this effort. The wing that has dragged the U.S. into war and wants to drag the U.S. into more Middle East wars remains extremely potent, notwithstanding Trump's resistance to them. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.